If you're a green card holder planning to travel outside the United States, what I'm about to tell you could save your permanent resident status. Starting December 26th, major changes are coming to green card travel rules, and if you don't know about them, you could be denied re-entry at the airport. Thousands of immigrants are about to be caught off guard, but you won't be one of them if you stay with me through this video. Welcome to US Visa Info, your #1 source for the latest and most accurate immigration updates across the United States. I'm here to break down these critical changes to green card travel regulations that take effect on December the 26th. Whether you're planning a short vacation or an extended trip abroad, these new rules will affect you directly. If this is your first time here, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because missing updates like this could literally cost you your green card. This is US Visa Info, and we're going to cover everything you need to know to protect your permanent resident status. Let's start with understanding what's actually changing and why this matters so much. United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, along with Customs and Border Protection, have announced significant updates to how green card holders travel is monitored and evaluated. These changes are part of a broader effort to strengthen immigration enforcement and ensure that permanent residents are actually maintaining their residency in the United States as required by law. Now, many green card holders don't realize this, but your permanent resident status comes with a critical obligation. You must maintain the United States as your primary residence. This doesn't mean you can never travel, but it does mean the US needs to remain your home base, the place where you live, work, and have your strongest ties. Starting December 26th, the government is implementing enhanced screening procedures at all US ports of entry. What does this mean for you? When you return to the United States after traveling abroad, CBP officers will have access to more comprehensive data about your travel patterns, how long you've been outside the country, how frequently you travel, and whether your trips suggest you're actually living somewhere else. The system will flag green card holders who have been outside the US for extended periods, and these travelers will face additional questioning and scrutiny when they try to re-enter. Here's the key change that everyone needs to understand. Previously, the general guideline was that if you stayed outside the US for less than 6 months, you were usually okay, and trips between 6 months and 1 year might raise questions, but weren't automatic red flags. Under the new rules taking effect December 26th, the threshold is becoming much stricter. Any absence from the United States exceeding 90 days will now trigger enhanced review. That's right, just 3 months outside the country could now result in detailed questioning about your intent to maintain permanent residence. This is a massive shift from the previous informal 6-month guideline that most immigrants have been following, but it gets more complex than just counting days. The new regulations also look at patterns of travel. If you're someone who makes frequent trips abroad, even if each individual trip is under 90 days, the cumulative time you spend outside the US will be calculated. For example, if you travel outside the country every other month for 2 or 3 weeks at a time, by the end of the year, you might have spent 4 or 5 months abroad total. Under the new system, this pattern will be flagged and you could be questioned about whether you're truly residing in the United States. Let's talk about what happens at the airport when you're flagged under these new rules. When you present your green card at the port of entry, the CBP officer will see an alert in their system indicating you've been outside the US beyond the recommended time frame or have a concerning travel pattern. At this point, you'll likely be directed to secondary inspection. This isn't necessarily the end of the world, but it's a serious situation. In secondary inspection, officers will ask detailed questions about your trip, why you were gone so long, what ties you have to the United States, whether you have a job here, whether you own or rent property, where your family lives, whether you filed US taxes, and what your intentions are regarding living in America. This is where many green card holders make critical mistakes. Some people get nervous and give inconsistent answers. Others don't have adequate documentation to prove their US ties. Some admit they've been living abroad or indicate they're not sure when they'll return to the US permanently, Any of these responses can lead to serious consequences, including having your green card taken away on the spot. Yes, CBP officers have the authority to confiscate your green card if they determine you've abandoned your permanent resident status. If this happens, you'll be given a notice to appear before an immigration judge, and you'll have to fight to keep your status, which is expensive, time-consuming, and far from guaranteed to succeed. So, what do you need to do right now to protect yourself? First, and most importantly, if you're planning any travel outside the United States, you need to plan it carefully with these new rules in mind. Try to limit trips abroad to less than 90 days whenever possible. If you absolutely must be outside the US for longer than 90 days, there's a document you need to know about called a re-entry permit. This permit allows you to stay outside the United States for up to 2 years without abandoning your permanent resident status. However, you must apply for it while you're physically in the United States before you leave. You can't apply for it from abroad. The application process takes several months and requires biometrics, so you need to plan well in advance. Second, maintain strong ties to the United States and be able to prove them. What does this mean practically? Keep a US address where you actually live, not just a mail forwarding service or a relative's address you never visit. Maintain US bank accounts and use them regularly. Keep your driver's license current. If you own property in the US, keep documentation of ownership and utility bills. If you rent, keep your lease agreement and evidence that you're paying rent. File US tax returns every single year as a resident, not as a non-resident. This is crucial because tax filing status is one of the strongest indicators of where you consider your home to be. Keep evidence of employment in the US, whether that's pay-ubs, an employment contract, or business ownership documents. If you have children in US schools, keep their enrollment records. All of these documents prove that your life is genuinely centered in the United States. Third, if you've already been outside the US for more than 90 days and you're worried about re-entry, consider consulting with an immigration attorney before you try to return. An attorney can help you prepare for the questions you'll face, organize your documentation, and advise you on the best approach. If you're at serious risk of being found to have abandoned your residency, an attorney might recommend alternative strategies, though your options become limited once you've already been gone for an extended period. Now let's address some specific situations that people ask about all the time. What if you have an emergency abroad, like a sick family member, and you need to stay longer than 90 days? Medical emergencies and family emergencies are considered valid reasons for extended absences, but you need documentation. Get letters from doctors, hospital records, death certificates if applicable, anything that proves the emergency was real and required your presence. Keep evidence that you intended to return to the US as soon as possible, like booking return flights that you had to change or correspondence showing you were trying to get back. What if you're working abroad temporarily for your US employer? This is generally acceptable if you can prove it's truly temporary and your employer is sending you abroad for a specific assignment with a defined end date. Get a letter from your employer explaining the assignment, how long it will last, and that you'll be returning to your US position afterwards. Keep evidence that you're paying US taxes on your income and that you've maintained your US residence. What if you're caring for elderly parents abroad? This is one of the most common reasons green card holders spend extended time outside the US, and it's also one of the most difficult situations. While it's understandable and sympathetic, immigration law doesn't provide a specific exception for this. If you need to care for parents for an extended period, you should strongly consider applying for a re-entry permit before you go. Without one, you're taking a significant risk, especially under these new rules. What about students? If you're a green card holder studying abroad, this is generally not a good idea for maintaining your status. Enrolling in a full-time academic program abroad suggests you're making that country your primary residence, not the United States. If you must study abroad, keep it short-term, like a semester exchange program, and maintain clear evidence that you're returning to complete your education or career in the US. Here's something else that's changing under the new December 26th rules. The government is also increasing coordination between different agencies. This means USCIS, CBP, the IRS, and the Social Security Administration are sharing data more effectively. If you're not filing US taxes, or if you're filing as a non-resident, this This information will be visible to immigration officers. If you're claiming foreign tax credits that indicate you're paying taxes as a resident of another country, this will raise red flags. If you're not earning any U.S. income for extended periods, this will be noticed. The days of gaming the system or thinking you can maintain green card status while actually living abroad permanently are coming to an end. Let's talk about the timeline for all of this. December 26th is the official implementation date for these new screening procedures. If you're traveling before then and returning after that date, you'll be subject to the new rules when you return. If you have travel plans around the holidays, this is something you absolutely need to factor in. The period right after December 26th might see increased delays at ports of entry as officers adjust to the new system and as the backlog of flagged travelers gets processed. If you're traveling internationally and returning in late December or early January, give yourself extra time at the airport because secondary inspection can take anywhere from 30 minutes to several hours. There's also talk of additional changes coming in the months after December 26th, though these haven't been officially announced yet. Immigration advocacy groups and attorneys are warning that the government may introduce even more stringent requirements, possibly including mandatory check-ins for green card holders who travel frequently or requirements to notify USCIS in advance of extended travel. While these aren't in place yet, the trend is clear. The U.S. government is taking permanent resident travel much more seriously and expecting green card holders to truly live in America, not just visit occasionally. What if you've already violated these guidelines in the past? Maybe you've taken long trips abroad before and didn't realize the risk you were taking. The good news is that past travel, especially before these new rules take effect, is generally viewed more leniently. The government understands that many people were following the old informal 6-month guideline and didn't realize it wasn't a hard rule. However, going forward after December 26th, you can't claim ignorance anymore. These rules will be widely publicized and violations will be taken more seriously. If you have a history of extended absences, now is the time to change your pattern and establish stronger U.S. ties before you travel again. For those of you considering applying for U.S. citizenship, these new rules are actually another reason to pursue naturalization sooner rather than later. Once you become a U.S. citizen, these travel restrictions disappear. You can live abroad for as long as you want without losing your citizenship. You only need a valid U.S. passport to return. The naturalization process requires that you've been a permanent resident for at least 5 years or 3 years if you're married to a U.S. citizen, and you need to have been physically present in the U.S. for at least half that time. If you're already eligible or close to eligible, prioritizing your citizenship application will give you much more freedom and security. Let me also address a dangerous myth that I see circulating online. Some people believe that if they have a re-entry permit or if they're traveling for work, they can live abroad indefinitely and just return to the U.S. occasionally to maintain their green card. This is absolutely false and will get you in serious trouble under the new rules. A re-entry permit extends the time you can be abroad without automatic presumption of abandonment, but it doesn't eliminate the requirement that the U.S. be your primary residence. Officers will still evaluate your overall ties and intentions. If it's clear you're living in another country and just visiting the U.S., your green card will be at risk no matter what documents you have. Another common question is whether these rules apply differently depending on where you're traveling. The answer is no. Whether you're visiting Canada, Mexico, Europe, Asia, or anywhere else, the same rules apply. Some green card holders assume short trips to neighboring countries like Canada or Mexico don't count the same way. But that's incorrect. Anytime you leave the United States, even for a day trip across the border, it's counted as international travel. What about special categories of green card holders? If you're a conditional permanent resident, meaning you have a 2-year green card based on marriage or investment, these rules apply to you just the same. In fact, you need to be even more careful because you also have the requirement to remove conditions before your 2 years are up, and extended absences can complicate that process. If you're a returning resident who already had issues in the past or who previously filed for a returning resident visa, you're under even more scrutiny and need to be extremely careful with travel. Now, let's talk about practical preparation for your next trip. Before you travel internationally, gather and bring with you all the evidence of your U.S. ties that we discussed earlier. Don't just have these documents at home where they won't help you if you're questioned at the airport. Bring copies of your lease or mortgage, recent utility bills, your most recent U.S. tax return, proof of employment, bank statements showing U.S. accounts, your driver's license, and anything else that demonstrates you live in America. Organize these in a folder that you can easily access if you're sent to secondary inspection. Being able to immediately provide documentation can make the difference between being let through and having your green card confiscated. Also, be prepared to answer questions clearly and confidently. Officers are trained to detect nervousness and inconsistency. Know your own timeline of when you left, where you've been, and when you're returning. Know your U.S. address, your employer's name and address, and basic details about your life in America. Don't volunteer information that isn't asked for, but answer the questions you're asked directly and truthfully. Never lie to a CBP officer. If you're caught lying, it's grounds for immediate inadmissibility and potentially permanent bars from the United States. Here's something many people don't think about, but is increasingly important. Your social media presence can be reviewed by immigration officers. If your social media accounts show you living abroad, working for a foreign company, or constantly posting about life in another country, this can be used as evidence against you. Be mindful of what you post online. You don't have to delete your accounts or stop using social media, but be aware that it's no longer private when it comes to immigration decisions. For families with green card holders, these rules apply individually to each person. If you have children who are permanent residents, they're subject to the same travel limitations. Some families split up with one spouse staying in the U.S. with the kids while the other travels abroad for work or family reasons. This can work, but the traveling spouse is the one at risk. You can't maintain your green card just because your family is in the U.S. if you yourself are constantly abroad. Each permanent resident is evaluated based on their own presence and ties. The financial implications of these changes are worth considering too. If you lose your green card, you lose the ability to work legally in the United States, access certain benefits, and you'd have to start the entire immigration process over from scratch, which could take many years and cost tens of thousands of dollars. Compare that to the cost of properly maintaining your residence or applying for citizenship, and the choice is clear. Protecting your status now is far cheaper and easier than trying to recover it after you lose it. So, there you have it. Everything you need to know about the critical green card travel rule, changes taking effect December 26th. We've covered what's changing, why it matters, how it will affect you at the port of entry, what you need to do to protect your status, and how to prepare for your next international trip. This is US Visa Info, and we're dedicated to keeping you informed about every immigration update that affects your life in America. If this video helped you understand these important changes, please give it a thumbs up and share it with every green card holder you know. Your friends, family members, co-workers, anyone with permanent resident status needs to know about this before December 26th. Subscribe to US Visa Info if you haven't already, and make sure notifications are turned on so you never miss critical updates like this. Leave a comment below if you have questions or specific situations you want me to address in future videos. Remember, your green card is one of the most valuable things you own, and protecting it requires knowledge and action. Stay informed, stay compliant, and keep your permanent resident status secure. This has been US Visa Info. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video with more essential immigration updates. Claude can make mistakes.